So actually, on the topic of having to report back how you were breached, the next, three things that I was going to talk about were how you might be breached. So the first one was some research by Checkmarx on code hosted in repositories like NPM and GitHub and other code platforms. And we've talked about research like this in This Week in Security before. They found that there were at least over 200 packages in those platforms, all of which linked back to a single gang called LofyGang. According to their research, the focus of all of these packages, so 200 and some odd packages, was harvesting credit card details and credentials for gaming and streaming platforms. I think the interesting thing for me anyway that Dharminder called out when he wrote This Week in Security was how mainstream attack for hire has become. Like LofyGang have a YouTube channel with video tutorials on how to use their tools. They have Discord bots where you can easily have the bot use stolen card details to buy stuff. And I'm guessing that like a lot of the high-profile ransomware groups, they probably have a customer service team.
Yeah, from our point of view in labs, we're finding a couple of really significant trends recently. One anecdotally, with the number of conversations and work we're doing at the moment looking into these kind of supply chain attacks is kind of going through the roof, particularly with regards to libraries, code repositories, that kind of thing. Supply chain is a huge area of information risk management. So I think a lot of the time when we're speaking about supply chain at the moment, it's about code, it's about libraries, things like GitHub and NPM. So those kind of incidents seem to be going through the roof. The one thing I thought really interesting with this case, these libraries, was that in the majority of cases, the malware, the kind of malicious code, wasn't in the kind of malicious library itself. It were the dependencies of this library that were malicious. So actually, if you were scanning for a library, maybe some kind of automated code scanning, you're very unlikely to find malicious activity or malicious kind of code in that library itself, because again, it's the dependencies. And this really just goes to, echo something that we've been seeing and reminding people for a while, which is, if you're relying on third-party, open source code, is to check dependencies as well, because you never actually know which of those libraries or dependencies could bring a vulnerability in.
It's interesting because one of the things that I brought up a couple of months back on This Month in Security was the amount of most of my job is spent doing social media stuff for the evangelism portion of what DevCentral does. And so as such, I'm involved in quite a bit of social media. And one of the things that I keep seeing out there from package developers is, hey, I stopped updating this package, so-and-so, you may want to stop relying on these packages. And Aaron and I have talked a little bit in the past about how important it is for developers. I sound like a broken record, I'm sure, to definitely make sure you understand what packages are in your code and what you're relying on. You have to know those packages as well as you know your own code if you can. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's hard not to come back to that XKCD cartoon, right? With the whole of the internet is being held up by that one tiny package maintained by one guy in Wisconsin. It's
Yeah, because I think one of the reasons why some of these supply chain attacks are really difficult to deal with is it's kind of like, you picture those, Russian nested dolls, you use a package that uses a package that uses a package that uses a package. Sort of, how far in is it reasonable or feasible for you to go and do your due diligence? And, is that far enough?
Yeah, I do think the push to mandatory software bill of materials is going to it's going to turn over a lot of rocks, right? It's going to force us to unpack those Russian dolls and actually see what we're pulling into products, not just F5, but every company that uses software or produces software is going to have to do the same introspection.
Yeah, I think we need, as an industry, we need to move to a place of something similar to what the web has, which is, the web wouldn't work without certificates, because it's certificates that kind of underpin trust and reliability. Now, there's a whole bunch of issues with domains and certs that I could spend hours talking about, but it serves the basic function of you can inspect certificate and be confident that you're going to the site that you expected to go to. I think what's really interesting with these supply chain attacks is it's actually a stretch to call them supply chain attacks, because in these specific cases, they're not legitimate libraries which have been maliciously, tampered with, which we've seen plenty of examples from. These are more like typo squatting kind of attacks that we've seen on the web. PayPal.com instead of PayPal. It's the same kind of thing where, these malicious developers are creating libraries which purport to have this really useful functionality. And to Aubrey's point, I think, if they see an old library which maybe not been updated in 2 or 3 years, but another one which claims to do the same thing but has been updated a month ago, wait, let's go and get the new version. It's going to have more functionality and was maintained. But developers that aren't spending the time to investigate those libraries don't realize that they're in no way kind of official or authentic.
I would imagine we'll start to see a few bad actors out there really go after open source projects that are maybe have a lax maintainer. I wouldn't if I were looking to be a bad actor, that's probably where I would start these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think maybe we're starting to see the leading edge of that trend.
Yeah, I would agree.